The Ayaneo slide should be one of our favorite handhelds. I mean, just look at this thing. It should be a slam dunk. You'd assume it's just like the rest of Ayaneo's lineup, but with a slide out keyboard, which sounds awesome, but I can't in good faith recommend it when it does so much wrong. Not the packaging though, that was honestly the best part of this entire thing. So here's what surprised us about the slide, what kept us from enjoying it, and whether the sliding screen was a good or bad addition overall. But before discussing what it's like to play and use the slide, I just want to quickly talk about what's inside of it. The one we have came in this swanky packaging that looks like a VHS tape, which you probably don't remember unless you're old like me, but the slide itself is white, but you can also get it in black, and it's got a 6-inch 1080p IPS sliding screen. We'll discuss the sliding aspect of the screen later, but the visuals on the screen are actually pretty good for an LCD. It does only have a 60 Hz refresh rate, but it can reach 400 nits brightness, and you've got this full QWERTY keyboard with backlit keys under the display. And under the hood, you've got a Ryzen 7840U, a 2TB SSD, up to 32 gigs of 7500 megatransfers RAM, and a 46.2 watt-hour battery. You may have to update the BIOS to get that full 7500 megatransfers since our system ran at 6400 right out of the box. We're pretty late to getting this video out, but we got our slide early enough that the BIOS update link that was supposed to boost the frequency wasn't available yet. It shouldn't impact your performance much if your memory runs a little slower, but if you want it faster, that's what you're gonna need to do. You can get up to 4 terabytes of storage and 64 gigs of RAM when buying the slide, but that's also like one of the appeals of Ayaneo is that you can get it in ridiculous storage and RAM capacities in case you want to waste your money on it. You do get 2 USB-C ports on the top and bottom of the slide, a fingerprint reader on the power button, and a micro SD card slot for extra storage. It would have been cool if the micro SD slot doubled as a nano SIM slot like on the Ayaneo Pocket Air, but it makes sense since this isn't just an Android device. The gamepad uses Hall effect sensors on both of the sticks and triggers, while the rest are what you'd expect for a handheld gaming device. Both sticks have an LED ring that you can control in the ISpace app, which can bring up using the ISpace button below the right stick. What initially surprised us though about the Ayaneo slide was its weight and ergonomics. For such a compact device, it's kind of beefy. It's not heavy enough that you can't use the device in extended play sessions, but it isn't comfortable to hold for a long time. And that may be a problem with weight distribution since it actually weighs less than a Legion Go and more than an ROG Ally, but for some reason it just feels better to hold those devices than with the slide. The weight isn't the only weird little quirk either. For some reason, Ayaneo keeps changing the ergonomic shape of their handhelds with each iteration, and this time it was not for the better. We all tried holding the slide here and agreed that it just feels a bit too small. Now granted, I have some massive mitts, but everyone else here agreed with me, and Kyler only has normal size grippers. It's like the grips don't have enough meat to create a natural handhold, it's too shallow. At least for us. The finish on the plastic back of the slide also isn't doing it any favors. Nearly every handheld not made by Ayaneo features some form of texturing on the back or the sides of the gamepad grips so you can, well, grip the controller. There is none of that here on the slide though, so it kind of like slides out of your hands a little bit. Gamer hands can get sweaty, which doesn't exactly mix well with these smooth surfaces. And battery life was another thing that kind of caught us off guard, and again, not in a good way. Despite the 46.2 watt-hour battery, you're not getting the stamina you'd expect for this. During benchmarking, we noticed that the battery was draining way faster than it should. We checked around online to see if there were others who experienced the same, and sure enough, multiple people reported it an unusually high wattage draw. The culprit? It's the display, according to our fellow YouTuber The Fox, who measured how much power was saved by turning off the screen, which draws around 4 watts of power alone. And considering the slide can only have a 28 watt max power draw, that's an unnecessarily high number competing for that battery juice. It also doesn't help that the system draws way more power than it should in general. Even at a 5 watt TDP, the entire system was draining nearly 20 watts, giving you about 2 hours and some change. On the other end of the spectrum, we got about an hour of battery life at a 28 watt TDP. It's just kind of lackluster when you compare it to most other handhelds that can get up to an hour and a half of use minimum. There were a few good surprises for us though. The keyboard underneath the power hog of a display is actually pretty nice. it has a satisfying click when you press the keys, it's big enough to be useful for typing text in games or web browsers, and it has an RGB capable backlight that's kind of nice to look at. It's a little awkward to use with the traditional handheld shape, but it beats having to use the touch keyboard for everything. Now, performance on the Slide falls in line with many of the other handhelds using a 7840U or a Z1 Extreme APU. Games like Control and Cyberpunk 2077 will get you about 30 to 45 FPS on average using Steam Deck settings, though you'll only have an hour because of that power draw I mentioned. Less demanding games can get you an extra hour and a half at 15 watts or closer to 3 at around 10 watts. Gaming on the Slide is about what we expected though. We like how the D-pad isn't squishy and you won't have much issue trying to hit specific inputs if you prefer to use it instead of the left stick. The right stick, however, is where we have some strangeness that interferes with how we like to use the Slide. If you compare the Pocket Air to the Slide, you'll notice that they're mostly the same in layout except for the face button and the right stick. The buttons on the Slide are a little bit bigger than the Pocket Airs, but the right stick is pretty much in the same spot. Now, I like a big button as much as the next guy, but there's something off about the spacing between the buttons and the stick that makes it harder to use than on the Pocket Air. It might be because of the ergonomics of the Slide make our hands rest higher up on the device than normal, and while your hands are resting this way, you have to reach much further down to use the right stick and bend your thumb more to press the buttons. It's not gonna ruin your experience when gaming, but it's probably enough to inconvenience you. But let's be real though, the big draw of the Slide is not the box, which is amazing by the way, it's the sliding screen. And honestly, there isn't much to it though, other than having a cool thing that proves to your friends that you're better than them. And for the most part, we left the screen down when not using the keyboard. And while yes, you can tilt the screen for a better viewing angle, I can't say it made gaming in bed any better. And with the IPS screen, you're not getting a subpar view of the screen anyways, so it comes off as more of a gimmick than a feature. But what this screen does give you is a nice dose of anxiety anytime you slide or tilt it. For some reason, the Slide has a pair of springs on the back of the display that prop it up and down whenever you go to slide it. And when you look at other devices with sliding screens like the Sidekick or the PSP Go, none of them had anything like this on the back. They also didn't have a cutout in the back that lets you directly touch the ribbon cable and panel of the display. And the springs, if they break, aren't the problem since you can just manually slide it up and down into place. What is an issue is the exposed ribbon cable to the display. You tilt the screen too much or accidentally snag on something, and congratulations, you don't have a working screen anymore. And another thing wrong with the Slide has to deal with the ISpace software. Ayaneo really wants to get the software on par with something like SteamOS, and it's getting there, but it still has its hiccups when adding games to the library, namely automatically detecting them, and it still has issues with things like lag and getting stuck on game landing pages. It's not as bad as when we reviewed the Pocket Air, but it still leaves a lot to be desired before it's as good as like the Lenovo Legion Go's Legion Space. But what's even worse is the fact that the software is also what controls the power state of the Slide. Also, listen to that. When you hit the power button, like on the Legion Go or RG Ally, typically the system goes into sleep mode. That way you can turn it back on and get right back to what you were doing without fully rebooting the system. The Slide, instead, skips sleep mode and goes straight into hibernation. This is just one step below completely turning the power off on the device. And while this wouldn't usually be a problem, there's a chance you'll encounter a black screen bug like we did. The system would power on, the LEDs would start glowing like you'd expect it to, only the screen would never turn back on. It somehow fixed for us after letting it charge for about a half an hour and then trying again, but it has been a continuous problem where it's not certain how long we have to charge it for, or if that's actually gonna fix it at all. Even holding down the power button for a hard reset doesn't actually make it work all of the time. And users on the Ayaneo subreddit reported the black screen problem too, but the company hasn't addressed the bug yet, so who knows if or when a fix is coming. But it was enough for us to believe that actually our screen was broken because everything sounded like it was turning on. Fans kicked up and everything. It was just the screen that was black. So especially with the flimsy mechanism, the jiggling that you see right there, and the fact that you can touch the ribbon cable, we thought we oopsied. But also, ISpace can get you banned in certain games with the anti-cheat software installed. We tried playing the finals on the Slide only to get hit with a system integrity violation message and the game booting us out completely. We weren't sure what caused this to happen at first, but we downloaded the files on the Ayaneo 2S, and sure enough, the same error message appeared on the screen. Turns out Easy Anti-Cheat does not like iSpace at all. Checking again with others on the Ayaneo subreddit confirmed that the iSpace front end was causing the issue, as users said the problem went away once it was deleted. Hopefully a fix can come sooner than later, because it really sucks that another Ayaneo handheld is just being held back by software. Overall, the Ayaneo slide is just kind of disappointing. Sure, the sliding screen is neat and the keyboard feels and looks good, and I'm messing with it the entire time, but the buggy software forces you to spend time troubleshooting rather than just picking it up and playing, which is only exacerbated by the price you'll end up paying for the slide. The cheapest version costs $700 and comes with 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. You'll have to shell out $960 to get this one as spec, and if you really want to go all out, you'll have to spend $1,600 for most memory and storage it ships with. And although the slide is flawed, it is still very much a viable gaming handheld. It's certainly not the worst one we reviewed. That would be the Z1 RG Ally, which you can see the video we made right up there.